How's it going, everybody? We have a big day here today, a lot of news to cover. I am headed out the door to a breakfast with a family friend, but I wanted to hit on some of the big news that's happened here today and over the last 24 hours. We have a lot of cryptos running. We have some good news from the banks, and this is all tying into push up crypto and other risk assets. So if you don't mind, please hit subscribe underneath the video. Turn that bell notification so you know right when I post future videos. You can also hit the link to Patreon in case you want to know why I'm buying and selling. I'm also doing exclusive videos about one time a week on Patreon, whether it's Q&As, whether it's just new videos that I don't post here. There's also a link down there to Webull in case you want some free stocks. I think they give you like 20 free stocks worth a few, at least $3 each, so it's like $60 worth at least of free stocks, plus they'll give you a good percent on your cash, better than just about anywhere else, over 4%. Now, you can see Bitcoin doing extremely well. It actually went above 31,000 earlier this morning, just a few hours ago, and making a pretty nice rally, breaking through some prior resistances. Keep in mind, in the past, we hadn't seen much resistance around 30 to 31,000. We could make a much bigger move. And Bitcoin's not the only thing that's running. Ethereum's doing really well, up 6.4% after their Shanghai upgrade. A lot of people feeling confident in staking their Ethereum now. BNB is up 3% on some news that we'll talk about. But overall, the best cryptos, the ones that are performing really, really well, are some of the newer cryptos. Arbitrum, Optimism, a lot of the Aptos. These cryptos are kind of the new, hot, fresh cryptos compared to last cycle where maybe it was Polygon, Solana, Avalanche, those types of cryptos that did 100 or 200x. These are doing quite well. Keep in mind, though, these are much larger market caps than some of those other cryptos were at the beginning of the last cycle. So I think that is something to pay attention to. I've heard some people talking about these cryptos, and basically, the shiny new thing gets a lot of the money, and there aren't prior resistances either, just all-time high after all-time high. But keep in mind, the fully diluted valuation is $16 billion for Arbitrum, and the market cap's $2 billion now. So 100x would be quite difficult. 100x would put it at a crazy valuation, fully diluted, like 1.5 trillion. So I would just be careful of thinking that this is going to do like 100x like Polygon and Solana did. But they still can do quite well, right? They could still go up a good amount. And one thing that I always look at is some of the dilution that's going to happen. Like on Arbitrum, as we said, 90% or 85% still has to hit the market. Same thing with some of these other cryptos like Aptos, right? Let's see. The market cap's 2.4 billion and the fully diluted is 13. So a lot of tokens hit the market consistently, which does cause some sell pressure. It's harder to move up in a sustained way. It's easy for these short bumps up, but it's harder for a sustained path to a 10 or 20, 40, 50x. Just keep that in mind. But we have a lot of liquidations coming in. Over the last 24 hours, 204 million. Not quite what we've seen in the past on some really volatile days, but that's still a lot. Almost all of it short liquidations, pushing up the price. Bitcoin, like I said, up to 31,000, fell back down just a little bit. I think as long as we stay above this 30,000 mark, it's going to be really bullish, especially because we did touch down and then basically bounced right off of it. Now we have some news from the Fed here today. Fed emergency lending falls to $139.5 billion from $148.7 billion prior week. Fed discount window loans $67.6 billion in week ended April 12 after $69.7 billion. Fed bank term funding loans $71.8 billion in week ended April 12 after $79 billion. So basically, they're not having to lend as much to these banks, which I think is positive, basically showing, okay, we stopped a lot of the bleeding. Maybe a lot of these banks converted their portfolio so they're less at risk. Obviously, there's still banks that are in trouble, but this gives them a little bit more leeway to raise rates. But I think with inflation coming down, we're seeing that they might not have to. Now, maybe some of these are massaged by the governments, right? Maybe some of the inflation rates or something, just so that way they can come back down on rates. There's some theories on that without people basically thinking that they're just giving in. They could show, hey, inflation's actually come down, or maybe it's just perfect timing. Who knows? We also got news from the banks here today that they are doing quite well. JP Morgan profit surges 52% on robust consumer business. So the profit climbed in the first quarter as higher interest rates boosted consumer business and the biggest U.S. lender remained resilient. So they're up 5% in the pre-market, basically showing that there's always a gap between what they pay in interest rates or APY and what they get from the government. So if the government will give them 4% or 5% on treasuries and they give you 0.01%, well, they make that money up. So for me, I do have some business at JPM and they don't pay anything. It's really hard to get them to give you a good rate there. Now, I haven't really asked, but they haven't offered anything, and I haven't seen anything online. I've looked a couple times. Well, some smaller regional banks will give you a couple percent, maybe 3-4% to keep your money there. Something they made a lot of money from a couple years ago, the Wall Street investment banking business, actually did poorly, and that makes sense. There haven't been a lot of new companies that have come to the market. There hasn't been a bunch of SPACs or anything like that. So that was kind of a sore point. But overall, they beat earnings, they beat revenue. Wells Fargo did well too. Wells Fargo Q1 earnings per share were $1.23 versus $1.12. Their revenue was $20.7 billion versus $20.1 billion. So overall, obviously there's a lot of money that's flowing to the bigger banks from the smaller banks. But if we see good earnings from the banks, a lot of people think that that does kick off a good earnings season. And they did say that the consumer was strong. So I think that is going to be good, obviously, if that's true, for the rest of the earnings that are coming out here very soon. And good earnings push up the price of assets. DXY is falling. DXY has fallen almost to 100. It's 100.79 at the lowest peak over the last day. Now 100.92. This is also causing the markets to go up. The fact is, the last two times that we've seen the DXY fall under 100 were 2017 and 2020, both of which started off a big bull run for crypto. So as the DXY starts to fall, and if the Fed stops raising rates, it might fall even more. Obviously, this is priced into the market, but typically when we see rate hikes, that means a stronger dollar. But obviously, if we start to see leveling off, that might affect us as well. Now, moving over to some crypto news. Again, 23rd BNB burn happened today. So that's great news. $676 million. So they used to do, I believe it was 20% of their earnings they would put into buying back BNB. Now they're not so clear with it. They say that they can adjust it. I think that makes sense too. You don't want to be locked into that if you have other concerns, right? Or if you need to come up with cash. But that's great news. I mean, BNB is up 3%. Not a huge move on this news, but I think this is something that really benefits their token. 676 million is a lot, even for something like BNB, right? That's 1% of the supply a quarter. Buying back that amount does make a big difference over the years. So they are obviously making a lot of money. If you just take the 20% rate that we're talking about, that means that they're making somewhere close to $3.3 billion a quarter, which is insane. Still a ton of money. Crypto exchange BitTrue has been hacked, lost over $23 million worth of assets. I don't use BitTrue, never used it, but just one more reason to keep the majority of your crypto off of exchanges. We see something like this every single day. So there are links to a really good hardware wallet down below. If you have over probably $1,000, I would suggest putting it on a hardware wallet. I use Trezor. Ledger is also great, but there are links to Trezor underneath the video. Some Tesla news. Tesla expands discount with price cuts in Europe, Singapore, and Israel. So obviously this is affecting the stock here today. It's actually down almost 1% in the pre-market while a lot of other assets are up. But they're lowering a little bit in Europe specifically is what I saw earlier. I think that this is positive for Tesla over the long term because it's going to be really hard for other people to compete if they're continuing to cut prices. And the fact is they have the margins to be able to do that. And they're getting more efficient in scaling too. So it's going to be interesting to see how their margins turn out for the quarter. Some other people, though, say, okay, well, their earnings per share is going to be less, so we're not going to pay as much. So they lower the EPS estimates and then the price drops. Overall, long term, though, we knew that they're going to lower prices. We know that they're going to continue to lower prices. So it's kind of like death by a thousand cuts. I don't think the market would react the same way if they had just done this with some other price cuts a month ago. The fact is that when they see it continuing, that's when they're a little bit more cautious and they're thinking, okay, how many more price cuts are we going to see? But overall, again, I think it's really good for the company, and it just destroys other companies. If you can buy a Tesla for the same price as some other new Camry, let's say, I would much rather have a new Tesla. So that's just my opinion. I want you to do your own research, though. Let me know your thoughts on that underneath the video. Is that something that you're interested in, if you could buy a Tesla for the same price as a Camry? And keep in mind that a lot of places you can, especially when you account for maintenance, it's actually cheaper to buy the cheapest version of the Tesla, the rear-wheel drive Model 3. But again, leave your thoughts underneath the video. Let me know what you think about the crypto market. Do you think we're just up only? Keep in mind, you have to be careful. You don't want to just go all into the market, but it does look really bullish right now. Of course, you always feel the most bullish when the price is up. A lot of people called for 30 to 48,000 this year. That's what we've seen in the past. A nice 3x from the bottom. I can't remember if that was 2017 or 2014, but we saw a 3x from the bottom to the top and then fell back down. So a lot of people did think we could hit 48,000 by the end of the year, but we still have a long way to go. If people are this bullish at 31,000, I can't imagine how bullish people will get around 48. You don't want to be the person throwing in a bunch of money at the peak right before you fall back down. So be careful out there. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Check out the links underneath the video to Treasure, Patreon, Webull, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.